Juggle.
Timer.
On it. Okay. That'll go off in a second. That's a convection oven with chocolate torts cooking. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, chef.
All right. Today should be a fun day. Today we're going to be learning a new cookery method using our rice and grains unit. All right. Last time we were in here, we cooked tabbouleh. What was the name of the cooking method we used to cook the grains for our tabbouleh?
Steaming.
This is the steaming method. The introduction of grains into a boiling hot liquid. Right, and the most important method in there is the lid that goes on top of that to lock in the steam and help them swell. That way when you opened up the lid again, there was literally no water remaining in those grains, okay? Today we're gonna introduce the liquid in a different manner, and the attention to detail here is gonna really make the final process. You can absolutely cook the kind of rice that we're making today, much in the way that you would steam it, but this rice is specially designed to make this creamy final product, known by the name of its cooking method, risotto. All right, risotto is made with a very special rice called arborio rice. Arborio rice contains a very special outer layer of starch. If you guys were to look at the grain up close, you guys would see a flexible line of starch surrounding a hard grain of rice. Today our task is to turn the starch that surrounds our grain of rice into a beautiful sauce that surrounds our dish. When this is made in the correct fashion, it eats a lot like mac and cheese. Right? It is a comfort food eaten throughout Italy, and that's where this cooking method originates from. Really not that complicated, right? But once again, in this kitchen, it is not what we are doing, but how we do it that makes the food good. All right, if we just put water in this, brought it up to the heat with all the methods and all the ingredients, it's absolutely not gonna make what we have. All right, so let's get straight to it. Hot pan first, hot oil second. We're gonna be using a blend of hot pan with hot oil. Today we're gonna be cooking with butter, but because we're gonna get the butter up to such a high temperature, since we're gonna be cooking with the butter to such a high temperature, I'm gonna be using oil to cushion the amount of time I can use the butter for. If I have this butter directly exposed to heat, inside of this there are milk solids that will burn before I'm ready to go. All right, make sure you have your mise en place done before you start cooking. I'll be able to cook in the order I deem fit because I'm standing next to my pan. All right, straight into there and allow that butter to melt in its entirety. In the meantime, we'll small dice an onion. Quick review of how to small dice. You got a root end and a stem end. Stem end comes flat off. You'll start peeling your ingredient down. Peel like a banana, down to the root. If they're in the fridge, this outer section will be pliable. If you're in your dry storage room, you'll find that this is a little bit more papery, pulls apart easier. If you see any dark green on the outside, that's going to be inedible. Otherwise, your peel should dangle from your root like so. We're going to pull that down, have the root straight up and the flat side down. Now, straight through the root. Turn my heat down slightly. Straight through the root. Fingers together. End of your knife into the onion and swing it back in. We're doing a small dice, so that'll be 1/4 inch slices going vertically. Will be the next step. Slicey, slice vertically, 1/4 inches apart. Down with the tip of my knife, not going through the back of my onion. So I leave those little small dice fingers for myself. Then to slice straight through. You notice in my pan I'm starting to brown my butter. I want that flavor, but I do not want black butter. I want golden brown, what we call a bear musette or a brown butter. Brown butter is going to be one of a very few amount of flavors in this dish when I'm finished. All right, once that starts to brown, I'm going to introduce my onions. There should be a little knob of butter left over for you in there. Right, as the butter gets the onions into it, it's going to cool down. I'm going to rock the heat of my pan down, and I'm going to let these swim. To this, I'm going to add some salt. We won't be adding any black pepper to this recipe today, as it's very subtle, and the flavor of the pepper overwhelms everything, and you just wind up tasting black pepper risotto. We're just going to salt this so we can taste the very few ingredients that are in here. The rice itself, flavorful and nutty when toasted. Parmesan cheese. Right, the better quality you can get, the better. If I had it my way, this is some grated Parm that we buy in bulk, but some grated fresh Parmesan makes a world of difference for saltiness, creaminess. All right, and of course our onions are going to be sweat rather than caramelized. Right now, it's just teaching the first years the difference between sweating and caramelization, and I'll go over it again with you guys. When we sweat something, we are trying to cook it deeper while making it slightly translucent in the pan over overall lower heat. When we caramelize something, we're developing the sugars, building browning, right, and starting to get a lot of complex, darker, caramelized flavors out of those. I don't want to caramelize my onions. I want them to sweat, all right? So as they get through, they should be roughly translucent, all right? While those sweat, and then yes, there's a ton of butter in here. Can everybody see that pan okay? Lots of butter. My onions are swimming. All right, so make sure they're, to this, once I can see they're about halfway done, I'm going to incorporate my risotto rice. Right, this is called arborio rice. This is the grain we use especially for risotto. You try to make risotto with a different rice, it'll typically just fall apart on you. Again, it has that cushioned outer layer of starch that we're gonna knead away with the introduction of some hot stock. All right, to this pan, we're going to add this rice in and we're gonna brown the rice before we start cooking. That browning process is gonna be called a nacre. Nacre is anytime we brown rice before we start cooking it. This is chicken stock. I've heated some chicken stock up separately in a hot stock pot up front. We have some hot chicken stock that we'll be slowly introducing to this rice until it's cooked all the way through. All right, now to our pan. To our pan, we're gonna start to toss all our rice granules in that fat until they're completely coated in the butter itself. All right, now for stirring rice, anytime we do anything, sushi rice, any grains, we're gonna use something soft, like a wooden spoon or a rubber spatula. If you use a metal spoon, it can cut the grains into pieces and you'll just wind up with something that tastes like a bowl full of grits rather than tasting each individual grain itself. They'll get more tender as they cook, so be sure to use the correct implement for the correct job here. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm gonna use the risotto method itself. Now up to this point, we've cooked the onions. Did we caramelize the onions or did we sweat them?
Sweat.
Sweat them, right? So caramelize means to get color. Right? For our rice that went into here, covered it in that brown butter, right? And we are going to nacre those rice granules, right? These are basically our two flavors so far, the sweat onions and our toasted rice, right? Don't introduce any liquid to this pan until you are completely done cooking, because this is the last time anything is going to be cooked in this pan without touching liquid, meaning it will be using a wet cooking method, boiling, steaming, that kind of thing, instead of caramelizing, cooking, sweating. So I want to make sure to introduce as much flavor to my pan as I can during this section. Keep it stirring. If anybody makes yellow rice at home, at this point you'll basically add a little bit of tomato, some sazon, things like that. We're going to be kind of following that same move, except not with so much liquid at a time. With our chicken stock, once my rice is toasted, I should start to smell something like toasted almonds or toasted hazelnuts. I smell that coming from my pan, so I know that my rice is cooked, and I'm going to want to start introducing liquid. All right, a little bit at a time. I'm going to be adding some hot stock in this pan, and I should hear a nice loud sizzle every time. This stock was previously heated. I don't want to add cold stock to this pan. It'll take the temperature of my rice down too much. You're going to start working that in my pan. Now, whoever's on your pan for your group, you're going to be constantly stirring this risotto for the entire time it's cooking. So alternate arms, because it's going to get tiring. The reason we're stirring it is because if anyone can see the liquid I've already added, you see how the liquid comes out milky? That is literally the starch falling off the ends of the rice itself. All right, and as it soaks up, I'm going to gently add a little bit more stock at a time, always trying to get that texture where the grains are rubbing together, pushing against one another, rubbing the starch off of their neighbor, right, and creating the sauce that this is all going to be sitting in. Like I said, this rice doesn't, as we cook this through, we're going to slowly introduce stock until your rice is tender, right? This varies on the humidity of the day, the temperature of your stock, and a couple other factors. At a slow simmer, never to a rip and boil, always moving. Once you get to a certain point, you're going to notice that some of the rice starts to stick to itself. And you can flip the pan to make what's called this wave. There's an awesome Italian name for it, chef. It's a
Landra.
Landra. Yeah. Landra. To make the landra, or the wave, right, is building the starch by pressing it up against each other and basically dropping on itself. Think of it like kneading a loaf of bread. As you get that move, you'll be able to introduce more stock and continue the cooking process. 2 minutes. And again, we're going to be adding, right, the very last step before we serve is we're going to finish this. You notice I've only salted once. I salted when my onions went in. I don't want to salt these grains because my cheese is so naturally salty that this will basically be the main salt of my ingredient. Right? The same way we're also introducing flavors with chicken stock, right? High quality, delicious chicken stock made with the aromatics that are present in there will be more than present in this itself. All right? So right before we come to the plate, we'll be adding our Parmesan cheese at the very last moment. Okay? So teams of two today, and I will encourage you guys, I have porta burners.